Hello, early friends, and welcome back to Max Talks About Character Advice. I am going to be doing a pseudo mini-series on character advice, so if you have questions you would like me to answer, leave them in the comments. For the time being, let's talk about today's question. I got a really good question sent by viewers like you, dealing with the idea of writing a character who is incredibly selfish and one of those really big negative traits, and the idea of making them likable. So that is going to be the subject of today's video. Before I go anywhere, allow me to give you the formal disclaimer and remind you that the following is merely just my advice, my opinion, and what worked for me. Don't take it as gospel, take it instead as just another point of view. With that awesome first take out of the way, what is today's question? Well, it goes a little bit like this. Do you have any advice for writing a character that is unbelievably selfish in her actions but is still a likable protagonist? I do have some advice, and it is actually pretty straightforward. Once again, we find ourselves in my favorite place to be talking about things lately, it seems. Morality in fiction. One of the big pitfalls of a binary morality system, by which I mean good versus bad, is that there's no room for gray. And of course, that doesn't work because that's not the way the world is. You can have a person who happens to be incredibly selfish and still be a good person, or a person who we can all relate to. The things you do and the way you go about making choices, it doesn't actually prevent you from being a good or a bad person. Again, just like in the real world, people are not just good or bad, we're all 50 shades of an overdone joke. There's a lot to real life that we kind of forget about, and one of them is the idea that you can have a person who is, for all intents and purposes, not a good person, and still be a good person in the story. And yes, you have the ability to relate to somebody who is not exactly a good person, a person who is incredibly selfish and incredibly cruel and incredibly angry and incredibly any other sort of negative trait that is part of our culture. Now, some of you may be saying, no, Max, that's not possible. There is no way this is, a achievable thing. Well, let me tell you a little bit about Lucian Wade. Lucian Wade is a protagonist from the first book that I published titled Ravensgem, and Lucian is not a good person. He is incredibly selfish, and he's made a ton of mistakes in his life and a lot of things that he regrets. The thing with Lucian is that he's made a lot of mistakes, and the worst part is that he gets that, and the worst part is that he puts himself in situations where he rather go the long distance and get himself in trouble than actually going the easy way, because the easy way implies something worse. And to not spoil a lot of what happens in Ravensgem, you should go pick it up. I wrote it, I had a lot of fun with it. Hurting a friend is worse for him than putting his life at risk. So you have to understand that somebody like that is not making easy choices. Now, if you have read Ravensgem, you know where I'm going with this, and it's the idea that, if you have read any of my books, you know the way that I write characters. I don't write cookie-cutter good people. Everyone I write seem like I've had so much fun writing them because they seem like real people, and I treated them as such, and they all have these tough choices that they have to make. And in the case of Lucian, when I finished writing him, when I finished writing that entire first book, I gave it to my beta readers, and I was a little afraid. The same way that you, the person who sent the question, probably feels afraid, is the idea of like, my character's not a good person. He's not. He's made mistakes and he regrets things, and I don't see people relating to him, but people got back to me, and my beta readers kind of made this for me, and it's the idea that they looked at Lucian, and a couple of them openly said, I don't like Lucian, but I understand him. And I think that's the goal here, because nobody is going to openly admit that they like somebody who's not a nice person. It's like, oh yeah, your character's incredibly selfish, oh, I love her. No. I think the goal here is not to find somebody who is likable. I think you want people to understand your character. Just like when I got feedback from my beta readers, and most of them were saying, yeah, I get why Lucian is the way he is. I don't exactly like it, but I understand him because of that, and I can relate to his situation. Again, this may not be the answer you were looking for, but I do feel that for characters like this, who don't fit that sort of like good versus evil mold, I feel that the goal for a writer is not to make them likable, it's to make them understandable and relatable. And of course you can make your incredibly selfish character relatable, absolutely. The trick for that, and it's a really simple trick, it's simply about letting us, the reader, understand why they make the choices that they make. And best of all, show us how that character justifies their choices. Because as that old saying goes, everyone is the hero of their own story, and nobody sees themselves as the villain. Do not ever let anyone tell you that somebody imagines themselves as a villain of their own story. That does not work. Everyone, From the selfless people, to the selfish people, to the most cruel of people, justify their actions somehow. Even if the story is not first-person point of view, if you just show us why they make the choices that they do, or how they justify their actions, you will be leaps and bounds ahead of everyone else because you're just showing them how they are as a person. And as I've said a million times, treating characters like people makes them as relatable as real people, because you can meet somebody who at one point may not have been the best person around. They could have been incredibly selfish and awful and cruel and violent, and you can still learn and understand them if you see their side of the story. Just like people, your character is not one trait. She's not just a selfish person. She's a collection of all the choices she's made and all the justifications she's had to come up with for her choices. And just like real people, if you want people to understand your character, give your character a chance, a moment, a stage through which they can explain their side of the story. I hope that helps, and I really do hope that helps, and if anything, I've given you another point of view. As some of you, if you've been watching these videos for, any length of time, you know how I feel about black-white morality, and the pitfalls in it, and, the mere idea that somebody can be one thing is just baffling for me, because, I myself, there was a time when I wasn't a really nice person, and I regret those moments, but I moved from those things, and if somebody was to ask me about that, I think that they would understand why I made the choices I made, and ultimately, as I've mentioned, treating your characters like people, the same way you would treat another real person, goes a long way, because it makes them feel real, and beyond being three-dimensional is the idea of like, wow, this character had reasons behind their choices, and those choices matter. Even if I don't agree with them, you have to respect when somebody makes a choice, especially a difficult choice. But hey, don't let me be the only person talking out here. If you have thoughts on this video, or your own advice that you would like to share on Unlikable Protagonist, or Likable Protagonist, feel free to leave them in the comments below, along with any other questions. Again, I'm doing a mini-series on character advice, so if you have any sort of character-related questions, send them my way. With all of that being said, though, thank you for watching, like, subscribe, do all of the socially related things, and if you would like even more writing advice, you can head over to my official writing blog over at maxkieran.tumblr.com. I also added a bunch of links to the description, so, if you want to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and, you want to follow me on Wattpad, because I'll be posting more stories there soon, feel free to do so. With all of that said, I want to thank you for watching, thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me, and I'll be seeing you soon! Mwah! Hello, and welcome back to the outro editorial. I want to take a moment to talk about the title for this video. As I was finishing, my regular speech, I realized that there's a little bit of a problem with the title for this video. And it's the idea that this series is titled Writing Better Characters. And I feel like this title implies that for a character to be better, they must be unlikable. And that's not what I mean at all. I want to clarify this right now. That's not what this video is about. Or, I'm sure if you've already seen it, you know what I meant. But, I want to just have no room for doubt. As I mentioned before, better characters for me, is treating them like people. Seriously. And some people don't like that, and some people think that's like heresy. To each their own. As always, this is just my opinion. Treating characters like people makes them feel like people because you give them the benefit of the doubt, You wouldn't go around... Or, it doesn't look nice when you go around branding people as one thing or another thing, right? So, if you wouldn't do it to a person, then don't do it to a character. Simple as that. I wrote Lucian, and Lucian is so selfish and selfless at the same time. He makes mistakes, and he wants to protect his friends, but he also wants to stay away from all of the feelings that he's got locked up inside of him. And I can't help but relate to the guy. I don't agree with all of his choices. Hell, I wrote the book, and I don't agree with everything he does. But that's his life, though, and who am I to come in and be like, no, you did that wrong there, Lucian. Hell, if I had been in those shoes, it's really easy, it's really easy in life to be like, oh, well, if I had been in that spot, now that I actually know the consequences of the actions, I would have done something else. I don't like that. I don't like when people do that, because it undermines people's experience, because, in the heat of the moment, it's really hard to be able to know what's going to be coming ahead. And I don't know, maybe it's because I always like to give people the benefit of the doubt, but treating characters like people goes a long way, and respecting your character's choices and the things that they made. Simple as that. Again, some people think that's silly, and that's okay. We're all different writers in a big writerly world. But with all of that said, though, there you go. Today's editorial on the concept of unlikable characters and the misleading title that I had that I didn't realize until I shot the video. But hey, that's life. I wanna again thank you for watching, and I'll be seeing you soon.